All right, welcome back to another edition of the Friday Golf Podcast. Today, I am joined by Joseph LaMagna and our esteemed guest, the founder, the CEO, the COO, the CMO of the Quadrilateral, the golf's only major focus newsletter, Geoff Shackelford. Hi, Geoff.
Hi, Andy. Nice to see you.
Yeah,
Joseph, nice to see you guys. I last saw you at the U.S. Open. And yeah, it's been a great year, hasn't it?
Yeah, Geoff is fresh off a nice flight from Scotland back to California. He's in a joyous mood, and he's ready to discuss the entirety of the majors calendar. We're going to give some of the big name players grades on their major season, as well as the venues and the governing bodies. So, Geoff, big thanks for coming on, and what before we get into it, I'd love to hear a little bit about your overall takeaways from the major season.
Really good year.
Men's major season.
Yeah. We still have one more women's and of course, the Olympics, but we don't really count those in the major world. I thought it was a fantastic year. It's kind of what you hope for in terms of majors. The courses played generally like we thought they would, or maybe a little bit better. I still have some thoughts about Augusta we might get into, but I thought overall it was, we had really good winners, good finishes. You felt like everybody who did well deserved to do well, and there were great little mini dramas and spats and fun stuff that kept things lively. So and less nonsense about world ranking points and live. I mean, there's still some of that. But I thought it was a way above average year when you think about some of the years we've had in the past.
Joseph, your thoughts?
I would echo Geoff. I think the golf courses, maybe with an exception, were very refreshing. And seeing the emergence of Xander Schauffele is a huge takeaway for me. And I think an interesting story to follow over the next couple of years. Xander Schauffele and Scottie Scheffler are starting to establish themselves as like the best major championship players of this new generation. And it'll be an interesting neck and neck battle to see. It's not crazy to think that Xander can actually keep up with Scottie, at least over the next couple of years. So that's a big takeaway for me.
I always struggle with like where the line of demarcation is with generations. Like, does it start with when a player comes on tour, or is it an age thing? Because you have like Rory's 34 and Xander's 30. Like, they are somewhat in the same generation, but it feels like Rory's of a completely different generation based off of, when he came on. I think I generally kind of like lend myself to when a player's career kind of started. I don't know. Where do you stand on that, Geoff and Joseph?
Yeah, I'm with you there. And it used to be a 20-year window from sort of when people turned pro, 16, 17, or after college. So we saw a lot of those European guys like Longer and Seve start to flame out a little bit at 15 to 18 years. And I think it's shortened now. And you're correct that, Rory's probably on the sort of on the backside now, and Xander was a little bit of a late bloomer. So you're right. They're only 4 years apart, but they seem like they're at pretty, I guess, just different stages of their career, but they're both equally competitive. And so, it's a interesting window that I think we're going to have to watch in the coming years, because I think my belief that the combination of money and the way the game's played, increase in injuries, swinging as hard as you possibly can stuff is going to shorten careers. It's just to be expected that we're going to see maybe 5 to 8 years, and 10 years is sort of the normal window for a really outstanding player.
Yeah, it seems like we're going to have to change like how we characterize careers if the trends keep going the way they're going. Like, it's going to, like, the way we discuss and talk about and almost weight careers now is going to be drastically different than before, which one of the fascinating things, like, if you compare it to like the NBA careers are getting longer, for star players because of the way they were able to take care of their bodies I think NFL careers are probably shorter in a lot of aspects, except for, positions that aren't, completely dictated on speed. I think that's like the thing. As the sport becomes more and more speed reliant, you're going to get shorter careers. And I think that's something that's not really discussed in the, distance debate and is kind of missed by the, I would say the savvy executives at Ponte Vedra that are, really considering every aspect of this distance debate.
Yeah,
they are
right.
They're missing the point of that their value in their tour is greatly increased when you have generational players that span 20 plus years. When you think about the golden years of the tour, the best times on tour, the longest careers happen, and the more that speed infiltrates and becomes such a profound, important aspect of the game of golf, the less likely you are to have a substantial amount of really long careers.
Well, and we know golf's not the most thrilling sport, but one of the things that people love in watching it, and a lot of people who watch who don't even play, I've talked all the time with people who are just fans. And one of the assets of golf used to be that you'd get to know somebody and you'd enjoy seeing them over a long period of time. And now the turnover rate, I just think it's a huge problem. And to your point, I don't think that they even think much of it at the tour. It just doesn't seem to be something on their radar. And I find that just bizarre.
They've got more important things to worry about,
right.
Like infrastructure.
Yeah. And getting championship management to run every tournament. So those are the things that matter. But as a product, it is so bizarre to see that lack of real curiosity or contemplation about where we're going and what we should be doing. And the players now being more in charge, they're not really the ones to start that conversation. I mean, Tiger probably understands exactly what we're talking about and has spoken on this issue. That's why he still takes pride in the cut streak, because he knows that thing has no chance probably of being broken just because of the way things have changed. And so, they have some issues. But I brought it up, Andy, too, with the governing bodies. Don't you in this equipment discussion think about these things? Do we want to be rushing kids at a younger age and swinging harder? And they've just generally kind of glazed over when you bring that up. And I think that's a responsibility of them as well to factor that into the discussion when they're contemplating rule changes.
Yeah. Joseph, we took a little divergence there.
It'll be the first of many, I'm sure.
How would you, from your perspective, a little bit more data centric than maybe Geoff or I, contemplate generations in golf and how you divide and tackle them?
Yeah, it's difficult. I think what I've sort of landed on is, especially as I've put more importance on major championships, I think the first year that a player plays a full slate of majors or 3 of 4 majors is kind of when I'm viewing the beginning of their active career. So I don't know if they toil around for 5 years before making it into any majors. I don't know exactly how that should be considered, but I'm kind of looking at major championship windows as the majority of their career, thinking about their windows that way. I don't know if that's necessarily comprehensive, but I think it's a reasonable way to look at a player's window of relevance.
Well, that leads us perfectly into our major championship discussion. It might be why Geoff's newsletter focuses so heavily on majors. I don't know if you knew this going into it, but to me, it seems like majors are more important than they've ever been because of the division. The division in the game has increased the value, interest, and overall compelling stories that come from majors because it's the 4 times a year that we actually see all the best players in the world together. Who knows if that will end? It seems like we're at a stalemate right now in the negotiations, and both are kind of sitting there. But let's get into the major championship. We're going to start with players. We're going to go to venues, and then we're going to go to the governing bodies and give grades to, if we leave a player off that wasn't, it's not that we don't like them or we don't like the tour that they play on. It's more a factor of they didn't really do anything that deserved to be on this list. And then there's some players that didn't do anything, and that's why they're on this list of players that we're going to run down. So let's start it off. We'll start it off with the top performer and kind of the toast of the town in golf right now, Xander Schauffele. He finished 8th at the Masters, 1st at the PGA Championship, T7 at the U.S. Open, and 1st at the Open Championship. I mean, I don't want to cut the suspense here, but I have an A+ next to Xander Schauffele's name for his majors year. What, is there anybody that gave him something different?
No. Joseph?
Yeah, I did not. The only notes I even really have on him, he gained strokes in 15 of his 16 rounds in majors. The only one he didn't, he lost a half a shot in a round at Augusta. I mean, gained more than 3.5 shots a round in all the majors, in all the rounds combined. So pretty historic season. And you can look at it. There's a bunch of stats that have been tweeted about him, but unbelievable performance this year. I don't think you can give him anything but an A+.
Yeah, what really stood out at Troon, I thought more than any time I've seen him, Andy, was how confident and relaxed he was. Just thinking back to Portrush when he had that little driver controversy with the R&A, just some of he could get combative and he came in for his press conference. I wasn't going to go. I had to work on some stuff. And one of the R&A people went around the room and kind of gave the hint. There aren't a lot of people in the room. Could you go? And of course I do that because we don't want to have players come and have empty seats. And he is the PGA champion. And the body language, the way he took questions, it was just incredible to see how different he's become. He's been a great player in majors from the very beginning, but to see that transformation, and then it really stood out in the championship when, we had that wind direction, and he wasn't entirely prepared for it. He admitted, but he also just said, that's links golf. That's part of the fun of this. Whereas other players came in and were whining about it, seemed shocked by it. And just little stuff like that just tells you he's in a special place. He's organized and he's not spread too thin off the course. He's just got everything going in the perfect direction. And I think he plays the game in a way where he's going to stay healthy for a while. So he's been so good in majors from the very beginning. And it's great to see somebody persist like that and break through in this way.
I think a lot of times with majors, like the pressure that is associated when you are close and don't have it happen. And he was going into the year like he's becoming in terms of weeks in the top 10 without a major, one of like the most prolific players that hadn't gotten one, and to emphatically just launch yourself into a whole different stratosphere of how you're thought of as a player in 3 short months since the PGA, 2 months since the PGA, is incredible. Speaking of that press conference, I thought that was the best press conference he's ever done.
Oh, it was great. Yeah.
He can be like very short, a little combative almost. And in that press conference, he expanded and gave more insight than I've ever really seen from him or heard from him or read, if you read a lot of press conferences. But like there was a lot of substance in the answers that he gave. And I think when you look at him set up, you hit on it, like the no injuries, the consistent improvement, the all around nature of his game. I think he's set up for, I hate to get like too far up ahead and like a lot changes in short windows of time in pro golf. And we'll talk about some players like that. But to me, like for the next 3 years, he's going to be one of the preeminent 3-4 players in the game of golf. We started this year in the major season. It was Rahm, Rory, and Scottie and Brooks. And I think now you have to consider Xander in those 5 players of true major championship stalwarts, Yeah.
And the other thing because we obsess about golf courses and like to look at them, the winning on 2 completely different tests within a few months is just is pretty spectacular as well. I mean, Valhalla couldn't have been more different than Troon. And we know that's just I think that's for a player, that is something maybe a lot of fans don't think about, but the pride you have to get from that and the confidence of conquering essentially a birdie shootout on lush green versus a crazy weird, and it was a really weird week in terms of the wind shifts at Troon and how the helping wind really was almost as hard as playing into the wind. It's pretty funny when you look at some of the scorecards, guys turning in downwind supposedly, and they almost played worse. And so to do that, and as you know, essentially at the start of the year, he was the best player never to win a major, and that was you're starting to wonder if this was going to be a thing that would linger, and he certainly answered that.
Yeah, now we have that question's like wide open again. We probably can get into that in a little bit, but any parting thoughts, Joseph, on Xander Schauffele before we move on?
I think we covered most of it. It's interesting to see him as a little bit of a late bloomer, and we have some of these other golfers like Bryson showing flashes this year in majors, but he was an elite amateur player. And so to see Xander Schauffele ascend and do it sustainably, there aren't too many other players who've really done that recently. Brooks Koepka might be the other one who didn't have quite the resume as an amateur and as a collegiate player, but we'll see what the rest of Brooks' major career looks like. It's interesting to see Xander rise onto the scene and do it sustainably. So yeah, we'll see what happens from there.
I think there's also like a little undercard with Xander. I mean, he barely got his PGA Tour card. And then he gets on tour and immediately becomes this major championship force. And I think something that maybe isn't talked about enough, and something that I'm going to dive into probably a little bit more in the coming weeks, is like the Korn Ferry Tour is not a good indicator of PGA Tour success. And I think Xander Schauffele would be like a poster boy for that, because the golf courses they play just aren't demanding. It's harder for a player of the quality and talent level of a Xander Schauffele to win and separate themselves in tournaments on courses that aren't demanding. You know, like I think for a lot of these players at the top, it's easier for them to win a major than some of the bottom tier tour events at really nothing golf courses, or if they went and played on the Korn Ferry Tour at some of these golf courses that are, you know, are just like not really high quality golf courses. Like it would be harder in a way, I think, for Xander to go down and win on the Korn Ferry Tour than it would be for him to win a US Open in some regards, which is a crazy thing to think about. But it shows how important venues are, because at these majors, it's amazing to see how the cream rises. And it's just like, it's a different, I don't think it's necessarily that much different than a week in, week out in terms of their mentality. It's just these venues allow them to separate. And Xander, Scottie, and, you know, they are great examples of players that, like, when the golf course is really demanding, it's almost like they're playing 20 people, not 140.
Yeah, and Brooks had some of that too. I would also just throw in, as a proud Southern California, that you add Lilia Vu, and of course you think of starting with Tiger and Phil, but this is quite an interesting run of great players from Southern California who are essentially public golf course players. We're not milled at the AJGA factory, and I don't know how you measure that, but I think there's something to growing up here. I mean, he made a joke at the Open. I was kind of surprised about the lack of wind, but actually you play some really great wind in the afternoon here off the ocean in San Diego and Southern California. And you play Poa greens and Kikuyu, and it's weird, but in a way it's also got an element of toughening you up. But to your point, he's somebody who's from the beginning embraced tough golf courses, and Scottie seems to thrive on those, and Spieth. There are people who just brings out something different in them.
Another anecdote of another Californian. I remember talking to Sahith after he played really well at the old course, And I asked him about, like, was it tough? Is it, how are you handling the lies around the greens and the firm turf? And he was like, this is not really much different. I grew up playing baked out drought brown fairways, and I learned all these crazy shots because I grew up playing on, like, effectively dirt.
Yeah.
And it's like there's an advantage. I think there's a genuine, I'd be curious if there was ever able to do a study, but I think there is like a genuine advantage, maybe not early in life, but later in life of a professional golfer for someone who grew up playing maybe not the best conditioned golf courses or the, different golf courses than someone who grows up from just a pure country club setting where everything's immaculate. I think there's a certain mindset that's created when you grow up playing a little bit scruffier public golf.
Well, it used to be the Texans, the hard scrabbled Texans who would play, in the Hogan Nelson era, and after that, same thing. And there's no question that it helps you in those kinds of conditions. I mean, Scythe played El Prado, and he played some beauties, and I don't know what the answer is if you're trying to raise a great golfer, but it does harden you in some way, I think.
It's just an acceptance. I remember putts just wiggling around and, greens that were like sponges and
brutal.
Makes you not really care about what any greens are after you've played most of your life on that, All right, let's go to Bryson DeChambeau, another Californian who now lives in Texas, a preeminent YouTuber, making waves with his latest video. T6, second, first cut. What do you guys got for grades and thoughts on Bryson DeChambeau?
Go ahead, Joseph. Yeah.
I have an A for Bryson. He missed a cut at the Open, and I think that's a big tournament to keep an eye on over the next few years, and how Bryson deals with different wind patterns and how high he hits it, and if he can figure out those elements. So really strong year for him. 2 top 2s. I think that's been done 30 times in the 21st century. So like a historic year in some ways, and then also the lone blemish of needing to figure out one of the 4 majors that he just hasn't had a lot of success in. So unbelievable year for him, especially off the course and some of building his public profile. But I think what keeps him from an A+, obviously, is that missed cut, which will be something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I got to drop into a B+. It would have been an A year, but the way he came into the Open was a little bit shocking to me. For the artist in him seemed totally ill prepared for Troon and what was thrown his way, and even in the practice rounds, KVV was out there watching him, and he was just going bonkers with the flight scope and all this. Like, this is links, man. What do you? I should have rushed to William Hill and bet against him when KVV described the scene out there of what was going on with the team and getting annoyed with the readings and like, you're on Royal Troon, man. What are you looking at that point? What are you looking at the machine for? And then when he comes in and so I just really wasn't prepared for rain and it's colder than I thought. And you're like, dude, where did you think you are? And it just seemed odd to me that I don't know if he was just busy doing videos between the U.S. Open and this, or Valderrama kind of
he had lived Nashville and Valderrama.
I'm sorry. How could I overlook Nashville? Yeah,
those are the places you play to get ready for Royal Troon.
Yeah, that really did not serve the LIV guys well. And I saw where Rahm is advocating for a links a week before, and to join his other list of things he's advocating for with LIV. And that surprised me that Bryson, he should know better by now, but he's always been in an odd place when he comes to the Open. It just seems to put him in a weird headspace, and he's just not equipped for it right now. But he's young. There's time, as we know. Many great players, it's taken them a while to figure it out, and I just don't know if he has a shot to flight it occasionally to handle that kind of golf when it blows.
Best case scenario for Bryson is that some sponsor pays him exorbitant amount of money to do a links series on his YouTube page. That's how he becomes, a great links player is he has to take his YouTube page there and his team, and he has to do like a couple of weeks over there, and that's what'll, breaking 50 at Anstruther, or that's 9 holes. Maybe it's breaking 25 at Anstruther.
Breaking 25. There you go. Yeah.
I think I gave Bryson an A. I think I could talk myself into an A-. I think the Augusta T6, it was a big finish in the sense of like he finally did something well at Augusta. But I also want to just point out it was like one good round, and he got off to a hot start. And then as that golf course got tougher and tougher, it got ratcheted up. It was pretty mediocre from Friday on. It was fun to watch. I think that was the real start of the rehab tour in terms of his image, and that's where he started to come off. I remember vividly like text messages like, do we hate Bryson? Like, is this a permanent thing? Because that's where he started to really interact with fans and everything. And then obviously, the PGA, the US Open I think that was an interesting one in the sense of like, I think there were a lot of questions about how that would set up for him going into it. And I think like in the past, that wasn't necessarily a dream setup. Sure, he could hit driver everywhere, but that firmness and the nature of the ball on the ground off those greens was not something that really was in the Bryson mold. There was no thick rough. But I think like what overrode it, and maybe you look at, and we could probably get to in Pinehurst, is that like that was a golf course that really allowed long hitters to thrive and succeed, assuming they kept the ball on the planet, which both Rory and him did for the most part. And then, I think with Troon, I don't know, he's got to eventually figure it out. I think what would be the live link site? Would it be Turnberry? Would Turnberry do that?
My understanding is no, because they don't want to taint it for a possible return to the Rota. But I think that's kind of silly to think that way. Trump Aberdeen would be the other one, but for some reason they've been very strange about wanting to go to either of those places. It has nothing. I'm not sure what it is. They do have to do some very extensive disclosures there about the financials compared to here. So I don't know if it's related to that, or if it's related to the courses asking for too much, but they definitely need to play a links the week before. I mean, you just heard it in Xander's comments. You heard it in other players' comments. Even though Renaissance is not quite the same as the open Rota courses, because the wind doesn't influence it quite as much. It's just the whole thing. The turf. I mean, I think going back to Xander, I tried to ask a little bit about it in the press conference. That shot on 16 he had. Yeah, it's just a tight lie over a huge bunker, totally chunkable. And it just takes a while to get used to those shots. You just aren't playing those any other place in the United States or really in the world. And even though Troon was a little greener, it's still such a tight lie. The moment, so easy to just miss it a little bit. And Xander described that essentially how he went about that shot, and he thought of Florida for some reason as a way to kind of dig at the ball just enough to make sure he didn't chunk into the bunker and suddenly open the door for Justin Rose, who had an eagle putt. So you just have to be over there playing some of that golf and then just getting used to the time zone and the late finishes and everything else, and the lack of darkness at night. It can really impact your sleep and jet lag and all that. So they I don't know. They have a lot of other issues to deal with too, though. So just getting courses.
Bryson's major career has been a very, it's kind of like a chart that just goes up and down, and there's a lot of peaks and valleys. Do we think he's going to sustain this peak?
Personally, I think there are golf courses that will continue to not set up particularly well for Bryson. And when you compare him to a player like Xander, where I don't have that concern, Xander hasn't finished outside the top 15 in a US Open. I mean, I don't have any concerns about what you throw at Xander. Bryson when wide misses get penalized and that driver, he's hitting it at a ridiculously high ball speed and it's not clicking, you're going to see some missed cuts. And then the Open Championship, he hasn't quite figured out. I would not be taking Bryson against Xander over the next 5 years. So I think a lot of those sort of tight, but the thick, rough, tree-lined setups where you can kind of spray it a little bit, like Winged Foot, Bryson's going to be a formidable top name. But then there's going to be these majors where you don't really consider him too much in the top tier. And the Open Championships might be an example of that, especially when it's windy. So I think the up and down is something to expect to continue into the future. What do you think, Geoff?
Yeah, same. And I mean, Oakmont's going to be really fascinating next year if he starts playing down other fairways, because he can't get away with what he did at Pinehurst, hitting 32 fairways, which were pretty wide fairways, and he still missed a lot, but he just did bomb and gouge, and it worked. And he got lucky a few times, just enough. And Oakmont could go either way. It could be a disaster, or it could be wild, where he starts trying to take advantage of other parts of the course when you have that option. But I'm with you. I think it's going to be up and down, and that's not a terrible thing. But I would love to see him adapt to links golf a little bit more, just try to figure it out and try to just put the machines away for a little while. And because he does have great natural instincts, I think that's what's fascinating about him, is there is a creative side, and I just don't think you can bring that to certain golf courses. And so I expect more, and I don't know if that's the worst thing, to be up and down, as long as your ups result in wins or seasons like this, where he was pretty spectacular for 2 of the majors.
All right. Jon Rahm. Let's go to Jon Rahm next. T45, miscut at the PGA, WD at the US Open with his foot lesion, not Legion 13, lesion,
no.
And T7 at the Open Championship. What are we giving the big Spaniard here?
C+, and only because that nice Sunday at the Open, I actually bet him Sunday morning. I got him at 125-1, just thinking the forecast was all over the place, but it was one of those, I thought if he went out in 65 or 4, he had a great chance. And then the wind just didn't do much for the leaders. It was still not nice out, by the way. It was cold. It was just kind of dank on Sunday. The conditions were not easy, and then the wind did flip. But that was about the best thing he had all year in the majors. Otherwise, the mojo just wasn't there, and it just feels like the move to live has thrown him off a little bit in terms of the golf courses, the 4 rounds, and it's in his head. And we know that's a problem for him when he starts thinking a little too much about these things and getting annoyed and getting caught up in everything that could and should be happening. I mean, Valhalla, he was a basket case, heaving the clubs. And so I don't think it was a good year for him, and I'm sure he would not disagree.
I've got him as a D. I just think that this is the worst year of his professional. I'm going to take out 2017 when he was a fresh, pup going around these places for the first time, all of them. I think this was a disaster. And I think you hit on something. Like, Jon Rahm thinks about a lot of stuff. He likes to have things set up his way. I think, like, you could probably say he's a little bit of a control freak. I think that probably is a lot of these players. And now he's put himself in a situation where he has almost no control of how he prepares for majors. I think, like, it's human nature probably to take your foot off the gas when you get a big pile of money. I think that he probably didn't come into this year in the same type of form or have the same hunger. There's that famous saying hungry dogs run faster than fed dogs. I think he came into this year a little bit ill prepared compared to years past, and it showed early on. And I think by the time he got in gear, he was in a situation where, there's a reason he's advocating for the links thing before, because he didn't think he was ready. And that's a terrible way to play major championship golf. And I think, like, what's going to happen, it could either shift and he could be fine next year. He'll be, more prepared than ever. Or this lack of control will continue to eat at him, and he'll get more and more frustrated, and it's going to be harder and harder for him to play in these majors. Joseph?
I gave him a C. I thought the T7 at the Open from the wrong side of the split was a legitimately impressive performance, so I couldn't go all the way to D. But if he hadn't played well at the Open Championship, I was prepared to give him a very bad grade. Andy, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying, absent the legitimately impressive performance at the Open. This is his worst year since 2017. And the PGA performance at Valhalla was the most lost his game has looked in a long time. And I do think it further underscores how different major championships feel right now than regular seasons when he hasn't finished outside of the top 10 on LIV. And that just feels as irrelevant as ever. And to be fair, the same side for PGA Tour results in a lot of these soft fields that guys are racking up top 10s and then can't show up in majors. So I think Rahm's that perfect embodiment of the difference between major championships and regular season events. And yeah, it's a C for me.
He's also got some weird stuff going on with the European Tour and trying to sort out these 4 events and not wanting to pay the fine. And the fine, I think LIV even, it's in his contract. There's a belief that they have to pay it. And he's just like, what are you wasting your energy on this? You have to play 4 times if you want to be Ryder Cup eligible. And he's making it more of a drama, as I understand it, than he should. So I don't know what that's about.
It'll be, I think it makes for a really fascinating story the next 9 months and when you think about it, just where he is when he comes back to Augusta, because he's in the meat of his career. We talked about how short careers are now. Did he just waste one of his 5 golden years? And I think if he did, it will be something that, kind of like maybe why he didn't get to 4 or 5 majors and he's at 3, or, I think I would bet on him winning another one. But I think what he did this year was you only get so many bites at the apple in a career, and he just took a significant percentage off the table this year. So, all right, let's go to Scottie Scheffler. Win at the Masters, T8 at Valhalla, and with an arrest from Officer Gillis, our friend. T41 at the U.S. Open, a little bit of moaning about the native there, and a T7 at Royal Troon that had some extraordinarily impressive ball striking associated with it, but maybe lackluster putting.
Well, until the 18th hole on Sunday, where he did reach for his back. So I've been wondering how he's doing there, but he seems to be in Paris, I believe, that I see, or maybe that was just somebody posting. I give him an A-. You won the Masters, so it's a great year. No matter
also
what he
won
did.
The Players. I know.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention that. Yeah, that helps his Hall of Fame points total.
Number 1 in the FedEx Cup too.
Thank you. Yes. So, the U.S. Open is the one that I think when I think he already has assessed it as a mistake having to play the Memorial the week before. You could just see he was gassed when he got there on what was it, Monday afternoon. And he went right out to the course. He probably should not have, probably should have shut it down for the day. He basically played a U.S. Open back to back. And in fact, you can almost make the case in a lot of ways, Muirfield Village might have been even more intense from what I saw when I was at Pinehurst looking up at the screen. Jack doesn't, the tour doesn't really control the setup there at his tournament. And he looked worn out. And you saw what he did before the Open. He skipped the Scottish. He went and played some links golf and tried to roll in a better way. And he had a good week, other than, he just couldn't putt at all. And the greens were really slow compared to what a lot of these guys are used to. It's just a totally different mindset. It's so hard to hit the putt as hard as you think you need to. And I think that, but it showed that he did the right thing. He got there, he prepared, and I think you're going to see next year he will not play any week before a major unless they come up with some mandatory rule. And I think that's smart. And I think a lot of guys this offseason need to assess both what they do the week before and whether they go and do a scouting trip. And we can discuss that more. But, I think Shane Lowry was at a huge advantage. And very few guys went to Troon at some point in advance. With all the private jet access, we used to roll our eyes at all those pre-tournament scouting trips. But they really should be doing it if they have that kind of access, and they value easing into the tournament more with rest and getting the hard work done Sunday, Monday kind of thing, and then being ready to go with a lot of energy on Thursday. And I think he showed that's going to be his modus operandi the next year, and that would be smart.
I think that was a big takeaway for me, Geoff. Hearing Xander talk about the benefits of playing the Scottish. I know it's a little different than what you're saying because he did play the week before, and you're suggesting Scottie might have been worn out from playing weeks before. So there's different ways to approach it. But getting your body clock correct and playing 2 to 4 rounds of competitive golf in Europe on the way in, I think the body clock is a huge part of this. And the difference between how other sports approach preparing in different time zones versus some golfers is striking to me. Like NFL teams, if they're going to be playing at altitude, they sometimes practice at altitude and get there as soon as they can. And they have techniques to get their body clocks adjusted. I do wonder if Scottie handled that properly coming into the Open Championship. So I gave him an A- as well. I think that with the win at the Masters, it's a ridiculously impressive legacy defining win. And that particular setup, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit, was one of the most demanding versions of Augusta we've seen. So that's one that's going to stick with me for a long time. But Scottie's having one of the best seasons of the modern era, and he was really only in the mix at one of the majors. He was kind of in the mix at Troon, totally ejected at Pinehurst. I don't think he can look at this as a season that was an A or an A+, considering he hit the ball unbelievably and really had one chance to win. So that's where I land on it all.
Yeah, I think he had a chance to win Troon.
Yeah.
I think I'd give him 2 chances. I have him as an A- too. I think when you're I think one of the things that'll stick with me is the almost like the disdain for the Pinehurst thing. I talked about this a little bit, but like when you are head and shoulders the best ball striker, you cannot let something like a little tuft of grass and tufts of grass in the native area impact you. You need to understand I'm better than everybody at this. And I think that was just like a rare chink in the armor of Scottie. And obviously, I think the PGA situation was interesting. That will deliver us one of the most memorable moments of the year, whether he didn't win. But I think, I think the putter's an interesting thing. Like I always have thought that putter changes are short-term solutions. And I wonder, did Troon illuminate another the same issue that hasn't been fixed since before the switch to the mallet, and are we back at this precipice? And then what's the next thing? Like you see mediocre putters, they switch the way they putt a lot. And what's the next thing for Scottie Scheffler if this kind of Troon type performance continues?
Yeah, and he blamed the greens a little bit at Troon, or he suggested they weren't very true. And I thought the ball rolled really well there. So he definitely, I chalk the Pinehurst stuff up to fatigue and kind of crankiness. But yeah, he's definitely at that he's one of those players, we've seen them where they just hit so many greens and it gets in their head. And he managed to overcome it a few times this year at the right time. But it's the energy, I think, that he puts into the misses. That's the other thing. You just the amount of energy into the reaction and the glares at Ted Scott, and that it's a little concerning, I would say. But all in all, he's in a pretty good place, and I think he's going to win an Open Championship, and Portrush should be phenomenal for him next year if he's in good form.
Yeah, that's Portrush. I think we could save this for later, but I'd be curious where it would rank in terms of the links courses now. All right, let's do last really big name, Rory McIlroy, T22 at the Masters, T12 at the PGA, second at Pinehurst, and miscut at Troon. Who wants to start? You want me to start?
Yeah,
I'll give him a B. I think that's the floor of when you have a major championship in the palm of your hand on the 71st hole. I think a lot of these grades come down to like I think, I've got some grades down for people that didn't really have the chance that Rory had at higher marks. I think if you're going to critique his major year, I don't think he necessarily was really prepared to play at the Masters. I think that he was really trying to still figure out his golf swing, and probably that trip to see Butch probably should have been 2-3 weeks earlier. If you remember, he had that kind of odd for Rory pre-shot rehearsal where he was doing the like setting the club, and it just looked uncomfortable. As a spectator, it looked uncomfortable, and I think it showed that it showed there was a little discomfort in the swing, and it was quickly removed from the pre-shot routine after. And I obviously now we're at 10 years of no majors for Rory. And maybe the biggest question, the biggest microscope that he'll ever have is going into the Masters next year because of what happened at Pinehurst, the finish at Pinehurst, and the really poor showing at Troon.
Well, he played a lot going into the Masters too, and I'm going to guess he's going to reevaluate that again. I think it was a good idea; it was worth a try. And but as you say, maybe it was there should have been a little more time to work on the swing if he was having an issue. Obviously, the swing was in pretty good form at Pinehurst and was not an issue. I'm a B as well, and I'm down. It would have been a B plus. The Troon performance was the shocker for me. I mean, obviously Pinehurst was incredible, and I went back and watched the 15th hole sequence after Smiley started saying stupid things, and that shot on 15 was 10, maybe 12 feet too far. It's a goofy green. It was a really well played shot. And Smiley did say it on the air that maybe a little adrenaline got him. He didn't say anything else about questioning the club. In fact, he validated the club for Patrick Cantlay. I don't know where Rory and Patrick are on 7-irons, but he wholeheartedly endorsed the 7-iron. There was no questioning of Harry Diamond. It's not Harry's fault. And I mean, it's just one of those killers. Yeah. Obviously the short miss on 16 was just, it just is what it is. It was just, it didn't feel good over it. Didn't look good. 18, he put himself in a bad spot, but the shot on 15 was really good. And it came off a birdie. He was criticized at LA for not making any long putts. I think, you and I might've even talked last year, Andy. The last long putt was the one he made on 12. It seemed like on Thursday. Well, he made a ton of long putts at Pinehurst, putted beautifully. And so, yeah, it's just a tough one, but Troon was shocking for me in that he has the ability. He should have gotten there sooner. If you look, I asked in the press conference about the wind change forecast, and he kind of started describing the prevailing, and I didn't know if I asked it incorrectly. And then sure enough, he went out there and he just didn't seem prepared for it. And if he had gone there in advance, he would have had some time on those greens, which are just so different, and take some time getting used to. And Shane Lowry did. And he would have heard from the locals that south wind in the summertime has become very common, whether it's climate change or whatever. It's just become a more common thing. And it was, sure enough, there we really had it 3 of the 4 days in some form. And as he said, I mean, you got to love him. He said, I didn't adjust. And I just wonder, playing the Scottish late, rolling in Monday. I've watched Harry Diamond work, and he really picks apart a golf course. And, what does that do when you're rolling in on Monday afternoon? You're a little tired after a long week at the Scottish. How much could you get done? And I just didn't get a sense. And obviously a lot of stuff going on in the personal life and all that. And so maybe it just wasn't an opening to get there. But I think he benefits from, because it feels like he's trying to do this sort of a little more of a don't overthink it Zen approach. I endorse that, but there is some basic stuff you have to do, or let your caddy do in his case. And he didn't do it at Troon. So that was kind of the one bummer there. That said, he would probably, if he were sitting here, he'd say, well, yeah, I didn't really do a lot of recon work at LA or Pinehurst. And I was, right there. I lost the 2 of them by 2 shots. So there is a place for what he's doing, but I'd love to see him just do a little more homework. It doesn't have to do a lot, but just a little bit more.
I guess I feel a little bit different. I have a B- for Rory. I think he's way too good of a player to only be in the mix at one major in the prime of his career. He's been one of the most consistent players over the past 10 years in majors. Obviously hasn't won, but he's been in the mix a decent amount, a lot of top 10s. Hasn't had a ton of chances to win, but this year, Valhalla set up very nicely for him. He finished T12, but was completely non-competitive. Didn't really show up at the Masters. Again, T22, but was never in the mix. And then was closer to DFL at Royal Troon than contending. So I agree. He was great at Pinehurst. But I think if you look at this body of work this year, to me, a B or a B plus feels a little bit generous, given that 3 of the 4 majors were closer to being disasters than being strong performances. So I think it's a B minus for me. And this year's kind of a missed opportunity despite the good run at Pinehurst.
What would be your grade if he had finished first at Pinehurst? Same exact result.
Given the monkey off the back narrative, probably all the way up to an A. But
yeah, so I think that's like the
he did.
Yeah,
he
how
did.
Much you just count.
It was within his control down the stretch. He 3-putt 16, like that wasn't something that was just completely taken out of his hands. So I think it's legitimate to penalize him significantly for that.
Geoff, I think the homework thing's an interesting aspect. And I think, to me, like with these majors, I mean, these guys probably are starting to realize this is what your legacy of a player is. And for somebody that's really, for any player that's really into the legacy, the major should be the way that you prepare. And I think Rory probably thinks that he prepares best through the no show, the show up, treat it like a normal week. We do this, I just wonder, like, I know a lot of these guys don't play fun golf, but like, I wonder why sometimes they don't just say, I'm just going to go spend a weekend or 3 or 4 days playing golf. Like, if you went and played Troon for 4 days, you'd encounter probably a lot of different weather and you'd enter that, like, just go play for fun, I don't know. I always I'm interested in like why that doesn't happen more. It's like if they do go do it, it's like we fly in and play one day. Like why not just play a couple days?
Yeah, they do it at Augusta because it's sort of more of an experience and they can bring people. And it used to be a thing with Tiger and Phil and when they started flying private and they could do that. And then it's sort of died down. And again, Rory's different, but a lot of these guys now have somebody else tell them how to play the course, look at Google Earth and chart out tee shots. And it's just laughable. And you ask the people at Troon and they were sort of shocked at how few players came early. And even for just a day or Shane was 2 days. And yeah, he's kind of a regular guy. I heard he went into town and got his coffee and did a little betting on I can't remember what sport it was now. Anyway, he just kind of hung out, got the vibe of the thing, and I think he would benefit from those returning to doing those trips if he's going to play the week before and play in, and obviously bring his caddy who does a lot of the homework. And I think more players will do it going forward, just because. We had enough examples this year of guys realizing they probably should have somehow gotten there sooner, and then also realizing where things are headed. If we're going to keep having these signature events the week before, they're gonna roll in on Monday, and that works for a lot of people. But you have the money and the resources to get there. And again, the golf courses are usually closed now 2 to 3 weeks before the event, and you'll have it to yourself, which is kind of fun, if you like the game, to have a major venue to yourself.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is like, I think I might take the approach of it's super fun to go like really learn this golf course and embrace it a little bit more.
Well, all right. And you're also doing it a little in advance, and then you're turning your focus to something else. So it's not like you're obsessing about it. You're gonna record all that data in your brain, and then you're gonna go play somewhere else. And it's not like you're trying too hard. And I think that's what Rory's trying to get away from. It feels like he just doesn't want to try too hard because he's such a naturally gifted, golf savant. But I really think it was exposed at Troon that he just wasn't prepared for what it threw at him. And it was hard. I mean, it was a brutal wind, and it was hard to adjust, but some people did.
Yeah, you saw it from the first iron shot. It came up like 10, 15 yards short. Like, when do you ever see a world-class player come up that short? And it was like, whoa. So anyways, Brooks Koepka, we'll move on. T45, T26, T26, T43. 14 months ago, it was, could Brooks get to 10? Now, where are we at? What was his grade, and where are you at with Brooks Koepka?
C-, just a dreadful year for him. And I just have to wonder if the live life is getting at him. There are a lot of little signs that he really doesn't enjoy it that much. Being a leader
his contract's up this year, right?
Is this a contract year? Jeez. Well, maybe he's just focused on playing well and live then. You know how it is. Forget the majors this year. What team is he captain again?
Smash.
GC. Yeah. Sorry. GC. Yeah. Got to get the GC in there.
He's Talora's captain.
Yeah. But another guy who just feels like the mojo's just not quite the same. And all that stuff at Pinehurst about the bad questions. And it's like, what are you so surly about at this point? Jeez Louise. Come on, man. So I think these were great venues for him this year, and I'm kind of shocked that he because otherwise I don't have any reports or any signs that he's having any health issues, and I don't know how else to explain it, or it could just be that he's hit his peak and he's just not the same. But I mean, he just won the PGA last year, so
I also had a C-. This is one of 3 years in his career that he doesn't have a top 5 in a major, and he didn't finish in the top 25 of a major. So pretty simple for me. It was a dreadful year for Brooks, and he's somebody that we're talking about as one of the great major championship players of the past 25 years. This year was not a step in the right direction. So I'm with Geoff.
Yeah, I echo that. I've got him at a C- as well. You just wonder. I think that these careers, how many years do you have left? And that's where we're at with Brooks. The other thing I'd throw in, I think this is just an adjustment that anybody that's a dad goes through. He had his kid out there. Like, life changes. Like, you know what? Like, the people, we love to make fun of the perspective thing, but like, your life changes. And I wonder, like, if this might have been just a year where he was, figuring out. And I think naturally, for a lot of people that become dads, it's easy to take your eye slightly off your job. And I think that could be it, because you just want to be there. You want to be a part of that moment. And I wonder if that's part of it as well. All right. Collin Morikawa, really pretty strong year here. T3 at the Masters, T4 at the PGA, T14 at the US Open, T16 at the Open Championship. I have it as a B+. I think like it's a B+ for a lot of players. With what Collin Morikawa has done over the last 2 years, I think a lot of players, I would move this into an A category. But Collin Morikawa has 2 major championships, and at one point we were talking about him as a potential, 6-time major winner, and this year kind of left me wondering, does he have the gas pedal still to win majors? I think like we saw him in the heat of battle in the Masters and the PGA, and it just seemed like he didn't have what his competitors had, and that's kind of where I'm at with Collin Morikawa.
Yeah, it could be, but I think it's I'm somewhere. I'm kind of teetering between a B+ and an A-, just because last year he wasn't so great in the majors, and this year he was there and steady, and I think he's going to continue to be a force and hang around a lot, and as we know, that's half the battle in the majors, just being there. And just things are going to happen, and they're going to be fluke winners, and people have crazy weeks, and the fact that he was there again, I don't know what the whole drama was with Rick Sessinghouse and why he had to make a change, and that was a mistake, and he fixed that, and it seemed like he was just kind of back to what he's been doing and hanging around, and you're not going to win every one of them. He got in the final group of the Masters, probably the major we think he's least likely to win, but That's pretty impressive. And I just think you're going to, if he stays healthy and kind of doesn't, the same thing with Scottie, maybe, the putting is still not great. And if he doesn't let that get in his head too much, I see no reason he doesn't win another one or two.
Two players finished in the top 20 in all majors this year, Xander Schauffele and Collin Morikawa. It's a B+ for me. My opinion of him went up this year. Short game's come a long way. By far the best short game season of his career. And I think looking forward, Collin Morikawa is going to be a force in majors. So super strong year. And I agree with you, Andy. If he didn't have two majors to his name, we'd probably be talking about this as like an A- or an A. But he's not Russell Henley. He's Collin Morikawa.
Yeah. All right. I think that's I think we're all pretty much in cadence there. All right, let's get to Viktor Hovland. High expectations for Vic this year. Cut third place at the PGA, the return of Joe Mayo, and then cut.
C- for me. Just again, the energy's just bizarre. Schizophrenic, or I don't know. It's just crazed. He's just an intensity that's just not going to work. I don't understand it, and I don't understand what happened between last year and this year. The getting rid of Mayo, bringing him back, and then I saw it at Riviera earlier this year. I was like, what is going on here? This guy's just a basket case on the course. Like, chill out. And of course, the contrast with Ludvig is unreal to watch how he approaches the game, and you just think, well, this is not sustainable. And, there are people who have been kind of high energy, neurotic golfers who've done well, but I got to watch Viktor win his U.S. Amateur at Pebble Beach, and he's just a totally different person. And he was, intense, but then off the course, he was chill and he was reading a lot. He was really into getting his mind focused on some other stuff just to get off the golf. And I just look at it now, and it's like he just really needs a vacation and a reset, and somebody to tell him, hey, you're immensely talented. Just calm down and get your act together here, because you're in your prime and you've got several years ahead of you if you don't waste so much energy on I don't even know what. It's kind of entertaining to watch, except that you don't like seeing somebody who's got that much talent be so bizarre on the golf course at times.
Do you think it's just expectations? It's the first year as a professional where, because I think going into last year, it was kind of like, is Viktor Hovland going to do stuff in majors? Then he has this great year in majors, almost wins. And then this year he's a favorite, like something that, going into the Masters, it was, talking about Viktor Hovland and the great major year last year. Could it just be expectations and how that can change your entire mentality and attitude as a golfer?
I don't know, because I even remember watching the year prior at Riv, where he was, it's early in the season, and I interviewed him after this, but I was watching him on the range, and he was just going nuts with the pin guys on his driver, and it was just so much energy wasted on and it just didn't feel like good energy, and it just feels like he's been trending in this direction, and it worked out well in terms of winning the FedEx Cup and the great second half, but. And then who knows what happened, but I mean, it could be, but he may just be putting a lot of pressure on himself, but it just feels like he's just somebody who needs a vacation more than anything.
I have to tip my cap to Geoff. I was pretty high on Viktor Hovland going into the U.S. Open, coming off a third place finish at Valhalla when he contended. One of the best players in the world at the end of last year, looked lost and looked like he'd found it a little bit. And talking to Geoff before Thursday, you were citing how demonstrative he was in his practice rounds and how his head just looked cluttered, looked out of sorts, and therefore you were pretty bearish on how he was going to play at Pinehurst.
We placed the wager, let's be clear.
Yeah, you won.
Yeah, with won. Matt Fitzpatrick, I won. I get a beer out of it because it was Fitzpatrick versus Hovland. Yeah.
So you won on that, and I think there's something to I've probably gained an appreciation, especially hearing from you, how a player looks on Wednesday, not necessarily the shots they're hitting in practice rounds, because I don't think you can always glean very much from that. But if they look out of sorts mentally, it could be a little bit of a signal. And so I think that's a good point to bring up with Viktor Hovland. So I gave him a C, 3 missed cuts, and a third place. If it hadn't been a third place, we're looking at a grade that's much lower. But he did actually contend at Valhalla, which MC3, MC might be more of an indictment of Valhalla than just about anything else.
All right, I'll give him a C. He had a chance to win a major, and I think that very disappointing rest of the year. Let's kind of fly through the next ones. All right, Ludvig Aberg, or Berg. I'm probably mispronounced his name. I blame everybody for butchering it 4 times off the start. He went second at the Masters, missed cut at the PGA, T12 at the U.S. Open, and a cut at the Open. I'm giving him an A-. It's his first time around. He was sensational at the Masters. And going into the weekend at the U.S. Open, it was a real, is he going to win? And for me, for a first-timer going around, I think this was a really great debut year for Ludvig. I know that missed cuts but this is not a apples-to-apples comparison to other players. First time around, really great opening major season for Ludvig in my eyes.
Yeah, I almost give him an A just because of that, being a rookie. The only thing I see is he's very reliant on his data people and his caddy to tell him how to play a course. I just would love to see him take a little more responsibility, but otherwise, what an incredible rookie year in the majors, and just nothing but upside, and just needs to, I think, own how he plays a course a little bit more and not rely on others. And he may do that. It may have just been a first year thing to do that.
I'll give him a B+. Second at Augusta, super impressive. 2 missed cuts. I feel like it's the type of year where he would take the results but not be thrilled with them. So I don't feel too differently than either of you do.
All right, JT, cut, T8, cut, T31. I'm going C-. The T8 was completely non-competitive. Flying on up the leaderboard Sunday. I'm gonna go D+.
I have D+, Andy. He got a little bit into the mix at Troon and then blown out to sea immediately. Hits a ball out of bounds on the first tee. He's in the prime of his career. He's 31.
I don't know if it is the prime. I think his prime was 24 or 25.
Well, okay, theoretically 31 should be a time where you're playing good golf. And yeah, maybe that's a better way to put it, but I go D+. What about you, Geoff?
Yeah, I would D+ is about right. I just, we now know it wasn't Bones' fault. And he was really good pre-Troon. And then you look at, as I watched him play a few holes with Tiger, and spirits were good and was hitting beautiful shots, and everything seemed great. I just, those scorecards though are just bizarre. That at Troon, they're just wacky what he was doing out there. And what is this volatility all about? I don't know, but I think that I do think he is sort of past his peak years, but it doesn't mean he can't still contend. And it feels like the drive is still there, and maybe there's almost too much. And maybe another player who just needs to take a little break. I don't know, but there is something odd in the energy around kind of his group, and with dad and mom out there. I just don't know what it is. So, but I would not write him off yet as somebody who is totally over the hill. I think he still has the chance, if he stays healthy and all that, the usual stuff, to contend and win a major.
All right. Last but not least, Tiger Woods, 60th. Cut. I have this as a B, and I have it as a B because he set another record to his long list of records. The made cut streak at the Masters is now his. To be completely fair, since the car crash, I don't think it's fair to have any expectations of Tiger Woods being a real competitive golfer with the leg issues and the lack of ability to play real golf. But how many more chances does he have to set records, career records, and add to the already illustrious career? He did it. Making the cut of the Masters is a huge accomplishment for a golfer with his circumstance. What about everybody else?
C+ for me. I don't really know what to say. It was so bizarre because he put in the effort. It felt like at most of the majors and really put in the effort, played more in practice than you would expect at times. Every time I watched him, the ball striking was good. Obviously, the putting is starting to get to that point, like a 48-year-old in a major. The stroke is a little bit different in competition, and I don't know if that's just an age thing or rust element. I don't think he's working that hard on his game at home, and he shows up and he still looks presentable. So, and the walking was sensational at Troon. I mean, he was barely a limp, and I just can't write him off yet. I don't know why he's wasting his time on all this tour stuff. Same with Jordan Spieth. I mean, it's criminal in Spieth's case what he's doing. Tiger's older, and like I said, I don't think he works that hard on his game at home. He's just found that place where he knows what the swing is doing, and it's a matter of finding it. I think he still has an Open Championship in him, a contention in one. Don't forget Greg Norman, it's been people who've contended at an old age. So I think that's very possible. I did get a laugh at the comment about the stamina that these people have to do all these meetings. I guess he's got to work on his Zoom meeting stamina here now, and he's going to get a lot of reps, it sounds like, in the coming weeks.
I guess we finally found one that we all feel very differently about. I have Tiger as a D+. He was DFL at the Masters of players who made the cut and has 3 missed cuts. I kind of disagree, Geoff. I'm pretty comfortable writing Tiger off of contending ever in a major again. I'm like physically uncomfortable.
Save it for the library.
I'm like physically uncomfortable watching him play golf. I don't know the last time he's put 2 good consecutive rounds together. I agree he looks physically better than in previous years, but in an era trending more towards speed, until Tiger puts together 2, maybe 3 good rounds in a row, I think he's very far from contention. And I agree, Andy, very impressive with the cut streak, but it's hard for me to look at DFL and 3 missed cuts and take away too many positives. I like the car accident and stuff. That's all important context, but it's not a good year.
I guess I think our expectations are just completely off the board. Like, I kind of now expect missed cuts,
Me too.
So, the fact that he made one was, I think it's amazing that a guy didn't play competitive golf for 9 months from the last time he played and then went in and made a cut. Like, just if you take everything out, I think that's impressive. And then when you consider that he was walking on a partial leg effectively, it's that's where I'm at. All right, let's talk venues. Augusta National, the host of the Masters. Obviously, I think it was a banner year for Augusta National in terms of the weather. It finally got great weather. It hadn't had it for years. We saw firm and fast Augusta National. Thoughts on overall the venue?
I'm not thrilled with the way certain things are trending. This sort of, the deepening of the bunkers, the chiseling out of these areas around the greens, taking away some of the bump and run shots that I think are still there or were, the way they mow the grass around the greens, because it's a different mowing pattern than, I think you and I, Andy, looked at it. Was that this year? I was with you, or we were just looking around the 9th green. It was so tightly cut and beautiful. And then you look at the fairways and they do that thing to push it towards the tee, and it's not as good of a cut. And so you still have those shots around the greens, but they're increasingly taking those away. So it's still, and the one behind 6 was weird. There might have been a drainage thing there, but that they could justify it as. But I just feel like it's still trending too much in the direction of defensive golf, and the shaving of the banks this year kind of turned 15 into a freak show, and I didn't like that. So we'll see what they do in the off season. I think they would probably agree that 15 got a little too extreme, and I don't like seeing Augusta get to where it's defensive golf so much. And I get the lengthening, I get all the other stuff, why they do it, but that's the part where I think they need to be careful that you just get players tiptoeing so much that they can't quite put on a show. And I'm afraid it's still in the name of of getting to a certain winning score, but I don't know.
I mean, if we're grading it, I gave it an A-. I thought this was one of the best versions of Augusta we've seen recently, and a lot of that's the conditioning. We got some wind and it was firm, so that's not really addressing the same points that Geoff just did. I mean, I hear you on how unnatural it's become and how contrived, not to put words in your mouth, but I think to an extent, professional golf and modern technology has imposed such a challenge on any golf course that I don't know if it's excusable, but you can at least understand where Augusta's coming from on some of that.
Sure.
So I hear you, but I thought it was a very, very good test and the best test we've had at Augusta in quite some time. So I gave it an A-.
I'll give it a A-. I think I echo what Geoff said. I think it's like Augusta National is just such a great representation of the tenuous strain between technology and golf courses, and how do you maintain some sort of reference point on winning score and legacy of your tournament without completely, dismembering your golf course, really, and I think it's just such a tricky aspect is like, I think they watch, some people might watch people putt from off the green and be like, we should take that away. We need to make them chip that. Right. And it's not necessarily the right thing. It's just it's a very hard, delicate balance to reach. But I would echo Geoff, like just generally the recent changes have centered around it's and I think there's like a lack of artistic nature to the work where it's kind of very scooped out and manufactured on a golf course that was supposed to be built with like supreme artistry, and from everything you read about Alistair Mackenzie's writing and his thoughts on things, for everything to blend into nature, it really doesn't. It's not doing that. The new work's not achieving that. So Let's go to Valhalla. I'll open this one up. I'm gonna give it a D. The only reason it's passing, the only reason it's getting its degree.
That's a passing grade? Oh, okay.
Yeah, D's get degrees, Geoff. D's get degrees. The only reason it gets a D is because of the fine people of Louisville that turned out and the fans showed up. This golf course in its current form should never host a major championship again. It is a bad golf course. And there we go. I'm done. I'm set. I'm stopping there. And this is not about Louisville. The fans came out. I in support of the tournament, but I'm good. I'm good on Valhalla.
That's harsh. I don't think it's I can't call it as bad of a golf course as you did. It's not ideal, and I was disappointed the Zoysia conversion almost had it maybe softer than it's been. But I don't think it's going to host for a while. But it produces drama. It produces interesting finishes. It's another course where the way with technology, it's just difficult to keep up. The Island Fairway hole was one where everybody played to the island. The first few times nobody dared. I mean, just things change. It's hard to keep a golf course relevant. It doesn't have anything mysterious about it. It is very straightforward, as they all like to say. It's right in front of you, and that's disappointing. But I do think it asks for players to hit a lot of different shots. And I mean, I'm going to go C- just because I think it produced another compelling finish. And you're right. The people, Louisville's a great city for a major, and it never disappoints. And so I wouldn't write it off completely. Do remember we have Quail Hollow next year, and Frisco, and what else? Yeah. So, I mean, we've got some. I think you may be wishing you were at Valhalla here, at least for a couple of years.
I love that you feel so different than me, and you gave it a C-. You really value.
Yeah, we really. Well, now that to me is a passing grade. I had a D+. Is not a. What school did you go to? D's aren't passing.
Illinois, University of Illinois.
Well, actually, I did get some D's in religion classes at Pepperdine, and I have a degree right there to show. Yeah. So I guess I should. Yeah. Anyway, Joseph,
I have C-. I think, Andy, you'd written about this well, in that Valhalla asks questions that were answered decades ago. And I kind of disagree with Geoff a little bit that it asks a lot of different shots. I think it's a lot of driver and stock shots. The one redeeming quality for me about Valhalla is the length, which if you had a short wedge fest, it would have been much worse than a long birdie fest. So the greens aren't particularly compelling, and the defense is length and rough. And that's just, again, questions that were answered decades ago by TrackMan golfers. So the game changes, and Valhalla doesn't stand up to the test.
I hate spending other people's money, but I'd be okay with Valhalla if they underwent a significant redesign.
They just did.
That's like, well, I mean, maybe they shouldn't have hired Jack again.
Actually, he did not really. That was kind of a lightly reported element of it. He did not really get consulted much on these latest changes. It's part of that whole.
Oh, the Nicholas companies.
He kind of gave away at some point that he hadn't been there in a long time in a few interviews. So it was that whole Nicholas companies thing and the new owners. And so what would you do? I think you start from scratch. I think you just take it and act like nothing's there. You act like nothing's there and you start rebuilding. Yeah. Okay. Well, good luck with that. I don't think the new owners are going to do that after spending all that money on the grass conversion. But
all right, Pinehurst number 2.
A-. As the week wore on, I thought they did a great job. It was greener than last time, but when you listen to what people said watching it, it was better that it was a little bit greener, and it was just a little much the first time. Plus, they just didn't have great weather going in. As the week went on, though, I really started to get a little annoyed at a few of those greens that I think were altered by either Reece Jones or Jack Nicklaus in one of the various green rebuilds, where they're just too much. And I wrote after that, the barometer should be. Now, I know nobody plays a run-up shot anymore, but you should be able to look at some of those holes and say, well, if I have to, could I land one short and run it up? Because Donald Ross, made a pretty big deal about that in his design there, wrote about it, talked about it, spent a lot of time on the approaches, and a few of those greens just discourage that. And there's about 5 of them, maybe 4 for sure, that they just need to be deflated. They're just up too much, and they'd still be difficult, but they'd be better holes. That's the only reason I don't give it an A, but I thought the setup was super. I thought the sandy areas, I was a little nervous when I heard about the extra plantings and that the superintendent planned to get a bunch of those out right at the Monday after the Open to begin getting rid of them. And I didn't find them to be offensive or tricked up or feeling like you were trying too hard to manufacture hackouts or something. I thought the setup, everything came together beautifully. They wisely kept the greens soft enough so that those goofier greens function well. And I thought that was a real testament to the USGA. It's not something that normally we would love to see, but they had to do that. And I thought they really highlighted what an interesting golf course it is with their setup, which is certainly not something we always say with the USGA.
Apparently, there was no wiregrass to be had in that part of the country. Apparently, the USGA bought all the wiregrass. So you could not, if you were trying to get wiregrass, you could not get it because it was all bought by the USGA.
Yeah, it's like Augusta buying semi-mature pines. You just, they hoard them, and understandably.
I gave it an A, Andy. I thought they really nailed the conditioning and the trade-off between the greens being receptive enough, but also being fast that I thought played wonderfully. I do agree with Geoff that some of the greens, I think specifically the 15th, is a little bit out of control.
6
and
too.
Yeah,
6 for sure.
And 6.
Yeah.
15 really stands out to me. And I think how distance friendly this test was, a lot of people are harping on you could just hit it anywhere, which I don't really agree with. I think a huge part of why it was distance friendly is when you're a long hitter, you're hitting a higher lofted club coming into these greens and they're perched up, and they're like 15's a great example. And you saw what happened when you're Rory and you're off by a little bit. So the difference between hitting a 7 iron and a 6 iron is massive. So I thought overall played very well. The danger around all of the greens and the level of precision that demanded on shots from around the green and iron shots was wonderful to watch, and a complete departure from most tests that we see week in and week out. So I gave it an A.
Yeah, I think I'd give it an A. I think you can nitpick with the greens, and I don't know if the big question would be would they lower those greens now because they have such an almost aura with the sadistic golf fan at this point, and I don't think they will because of that. I would like them to. I think that having played there a handful of times, like you hit you're just like, where do I even land this? And this is when the greens are soft. I mean, they keep them so soft for public
number
play.
2, another one. Yeah. Like, where do you land it?
Yeah. And I think the other thing is like with stuff like number 2 is like they've sneakily narrowed fairways at yardages. Like they're way narrower than they should be. And like with number 2, yeah, if I could get up the left side a little bit more, it would be okay because I could get the angle, but sometimes they're unafforded. That being said, I went into the week kind of bummed out about how often Pinehurst is going to be there over the next 25 years and walked away with like, okay, if one course is going to be in here, this is pretty fun one to watch golf on. And I can't say the same about Pebble, but that's what.
Yeah, no, it's going in the other direction. I guess, I'm with you there. I was like, wow, this is too many opens in a short time, and I think that's a credit to the people running Pinehurst. You just felt the investment they made. I still didn't see anything on the USGA side that made me understand the anchor concept anymore, but I did see it from the Pinehurst side, and I felt like they did a superb job of. Just having been there when they were sort of kicking and screaming into the restoration, and now seeing how much they're buying into it, how much they appreciate architecture and its role on both the championship, but also people wanting to come there and stay, and all the great courses and that are not also in their control that have done work, and just the effect, that classic effect we've seen where it spills out to other golf courses. And now what they're doing out with number 10 and probably number 11, they've just gotten so golf driven and focused or almost obsessed. And I love that. And so I thought that part of it is what made you feel like, okay, they've taken advantage of this anchor thing, and they haven't gotten cheap. Whereas, I'm not sure yet about Pebble Beach. I just saw the aerials of the 6th hole and I just went, they just redid the green. And that's what you got out of it. Are you kidding me? I mean, so there's still I feel like there's still something missing there at Pebble that the Pinehurst people really have tapped into and get. And kudos to everybody, Tom Ashley and the whole team, on down to the maintenance teams. It's just sensational. So fix those 5 greens.
All right, last one, Royal Troon.
I've got to give it an A. I just thought it was fascinating how it played, and obviously Mother Nature came through. We've had a lot of majors lately where you're living a little disappointed at the natural elements not delivering a little more wind, and it certainly did. It was really hard. You just can't grasp how hard that wind was from the southeast, and how it really didn't make any hole easier. And I thought the players were asked a lot of different questions. It was a little green at the start of the week. They were very nervous about Thursday's forecast. They managed to get the gravities up. I still don't know how that all works, but they did get some firmness and speed because the greens were shockingly slow and green. The only disappointment was that it was much greener than all the other links that I played and saw in the area. But the rough was more. Last time it was just a lost ball in the rough at any of the courses around there, and all the courses have really emphasized rough management. So I think even when it got super windy, and obviously these guys have marshals looking for balls, but it just not having that rough be quite as absurd helped. And the bunkers are I really gained a new appreciation for a lot of the holes there that in the prevailing wind aren't very interesting in the modern game, and they became the stars of the show last week, especially those first 5 holes and the stuff that went on there that didn't go on before. So I wouldn't want to play it every day. I don't think it's much fun. I think it's really hard, but I think it's about as quintessential an open venue as you can get in terms of everything it asked for, and the postage stamp and the railway and sort of the pockets and the subtleties and what it brings out with a little bit of wind.
I give it an A also, Geoff. I think it's even better as an entertainment venue than as a golf course, even though I like it as a golf course. But I think for fans, understanding the directions of the nines is distinctive and something that I appreciate about it. The distinctiveness of the postage stamp and the 11th hole, like it creates those moments that people can anticipate and have some context for before the players get there. Obviously, the weather was ideal for this championship, and I'd be curious what grades we would give this venue if it was mild, but it is on the ocean and you get reliable wind. So I think it's a phenomenal place to keep coming back. It's an A for me.
I think it's the golf course that has the most elements. You know, it's the easiest of the open venues, from what I gather, to rely on the elements, which I think is like a huge benefit to it. I think it's probably a golf course in the open rota that I thought of as a middle of the road one that gets bumped up towards the top end of the rota. I think like the thing that I always am taken aback by the opens is just like how much better golf is when bunkers are hazards and they are something that players fear. And I don't know I don't think it, in a lot of cases there are like conceivable ways to accomplish this in a lot of American courses outside of going to like the revetted pot bunker route. But like the idea of my ball being able to run up against that revetment and leave me with like no shot, or I'm going out sideways, that is the ultimate. It's a hazard acting as a hazard for the best players in the world, which is so rare outside of water and out of bounds, where like it's the only way where you can put something on the side of the fairway. And I think like it was telling watching how these guys played the first, second holes is like the bunkers were real deterrents. It's like they're hitting mid irons off the tee because they're afraid of these bunkers, and it makes, it just like has a ripple effect as the 380-yard hole. All of a sudden, with it into the wind, these guys are hitting like kind of mid irons into a short par four. And when it was downwind, they're still hitting 9 irons. It's hard to get to those tuck pins behind the bunker that they put that front pin. Like, to me, I just think that bunker, in terms of pro golf, and I think it just introduces real strategy. And I think that's just so sorely missed in so many places. And that was, one of the things that will last with me from Troon.
Yeah. And the wind made the driver, it just made the dynamics different off the tee, which was nice. There wasn't quite the emphasis on the driver. The other thing on the bunkers, Andy, it's beach sand and they had a pretty deep tine, and that definitely added. They weren't ridiculous, but that did not give you many good clean lies, even though they do have a bunker raker in each group, and certain holes even seem to have a bunker raker on their own. The postage stamp, I think, had its own cruise. So yeah, but they were difficult because of that as well. And then they're just well placed, and the setup was. I felt like it was a little better this time. It just felt like it was a little bit wider, but it also brought more of the bunkers into play, and it was fascinating. I mean, it was intense. I'll tell you, the other cool thing was on the postage stamp, because of the grandstand blocking the players the first day. A lot of guys just could not believe the win. But when I was out there for a few hours, I realized at the end I should have stopped watching the shots, because the crowds are so knowledgeable there, and the people behind the players, and maybe even the ones kind of off to the side, as soon as the ball got up in the air, they would react in a way that if you weren't watching, you could guess either it was toast, it was just no chance. There was an anticipatory kind of, and then, I mean, there were all these different little sounds they'd make where you kind of knew what the ball was going to do, because they'd been sitting there a while, and they just knew when a tee shot was bad. And that was just a cool dynamic, I think. I mean, I have mixed feelings about the grandstand impacting it, but then if you look the next day, same win, the guys accepted it more, and the scoring average improved greatly with the same exact win. So it was another element where they a little more trust in the golf course would have helped some people. And I did find out they did not put flags on that grandstand because because of the approaching planes. It was not a RNA ploy to deceive the players on the wind, but it was spectacular. And don't you love every guy saying, "Why can't we have more of these holes? We don't need another 230-yard par 3." I just love that, and I'm glad they say it. They should, because the 17th was not better. Another 12, 13 yards, whatever it was. The 5th wasn't better. Getting longer, I didn't think. I mean, the location of the tee was nice, but I do love that the guys call that out. And it's these organizations are just a little too obsessed with getting the same exact club in their hand on those holes, and it's just not. The game's changed. The lofts are different. There's just different reasons, and there's just a point where a par 3 loses something, and the same thing happened at LA last year. When you get too far back, it's just so far away. You just lose a connection with the green, and it's just not as much. It's not as interesting to play or watch generally.
Yeah, I would echo those. We were going to get to the governing bodies, but our time has passed here. We'll have to do that at a future point. Geoff, thank you so much. Everybody that's super interested in golf should be subscribing to your Substack, the Quadrilateral. Is it $50 a year still? I'm on auto payment.
59.
50. Oh, a little price hike. Inflation.
We started 49 and went to 54 and 59 now. Yeah, the inflation definitely prompted it.
It's a bargain.
Thanks.
It is awesome. The stuff you put out, the perspective, the insight. It's something that I've admired. I've read you since I was like for a very, very long time. And I've always appreciated your insight and voice in the game. I think there are very few distinct voices in the game of golf, and you've been one for decades. We should be applauding your longevity for distinctness and voice. And thank you for coming on and chatting with us, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right. Thanks, Andy.